back. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Welch. You're the first to do that. Senator Tillis?
I was actually going to thank Senator Welch for that. I think, Mr. Chair, we probably ought to have 4-minute rounds so we have a reasonable chance of them getting done in 7 minutes. General Garland, I guess I'm your ticket to lunch. I've just got a couple of questions to ask you. In your opening statement, I'm sorry I had to come in and out. I wanted to spend most of my time in the hearing. You have 115,000 people working in the DOJ, and I think most of them are great people, purpose, service-driven, and I thank them for their work. But we're not all angels. We probably have some that need to be held accountable. And you made a comment about returning to some of the norms that maybe have drifted over time or a focus on them. Can you briefly describe to me a couple of those where you see positive trending?
Yeah, I think the most important is the principle that we treat like cases alike, that we don't have one rule for Democrats or Republicans, rich, poor, powerful, powerless, based on ethnicity. Another important norm is that we decide our criminal investigations and affirmative civil law enforcement investigations without any interference from the White House or, frankly, from the Congress. That these decisions are made on the merits without any policy or political interference.
I think one thing that would be helpful for you, I'm a data-driven person. I think one of the things that would be helpful for you is to try, to the extent that you can, to measure, some of those so that you come back equipped with data to maybe refute some of the misconceptions about your priorities. I want to talk briefly about my favorite subject when I get on law enforcement. Have you seen the 3.12 March? All right, this is a subpage.
March 12th?
I'll shoot you a link. This
Okay.
is a subpage that's been out there for a while. It's actually a subpage from ActBlue, which is the largest aggregation engine for many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle for hard dollar contributions to their campaigns, which I don't begrudge. We have an equivalent platform. What's notable about this is still on the website. They're trying to raise $1.312 million. They've already received contributions. They keep it on the website. And let me just tell you what the run's about. They say, why 3.12 miles? Because 3.12 equals ACAB. And ACAB equals all cops are bastards. This is out there. I know that the vast majority of my Democratic colleagues do not embrace that. Some of them may. But I think it's time to remove this website and remove this crap that they're trying to talk about law enforcement. In 2020 and 2021, I introduced a bill called Protect and Serve. And it was specifically focused on increasing penalties for law enforcement officers who were assaulted or murdered. Not getting into any sort of policy recommendations, but it seems to me at a time when we're having dramatic reductions in people willing to go into the academies, where we're seeing mayors get elected out of office because of community safety and maybe a little bit too much soft on law enforcement. And when we demonize law enforcement, we are really hurting ourselves. I know the FBI is doing relatively well with recruiting, but we're not doing well in local and state agencies. So can you see, with respect to the implementation, we've talked about increasing penalties in other places. Can you talk to me about the merits or concerns you would have if we're successful with getting Protect and Serve passed this Congress?
Every day, I meet with our own law enforcement agencies. Multiple times a year, I meet with national leaders of state and local law enforcement, police chiefs, sheriffs, and multiple times during the year, I travel all around the country to our U.S. Attorney's offices where I meet with the state and local law enforcement agencies. They are the ones who are on the front lines every day.
They're getting killed.
And I should have added, I've been to many memorials. I've been to all the memorials that happen every year. I've stood and sat at the bedside of federal law enforcement agents who've been shot. I've been to a memorial for a federal law enforcement agent who was killed. I'm well aware of the risks that they run to protect us. We are extremely supportive of law enforcement.
Yeah, what I'd like
well,
to do, I'm sorry to interrupt
no,
you,
no.
it's not my style, but what I'd like to do is really get some feedback. We are going to file the bill again. We do have interest from the Democratic side. I'm always interested in policy that makes it easier to implement. So we would like to get a commitment to take a look at this and give us advice on things that could improve it or potential unintended consequences. I don't see any, but I would like to get that commitment.
Absolutely, we will be happy to do that. I do want to say I agree with your problems about recruitment and retention. That's why we gave out $100 million under the COPS grant just for that purpose, and we're going to do another $200 million this coming year.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to submit some questions for the record on various topics and look forward to your response. But in my remaining time, I want to talk about the implementation of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, or what I think your department, and I like the term, calls BISCA. I had a discussion with ATF earlier this week, and it has been described as a once-in-a-generation bill. That bill went from the initial meeting that I attended to the time that we were voting on the Senate floor in 30 days. That required a lot of hands-on involvement by the Senate members on both sides of the aisle that brought that about. What's very important to me, unless we want another generation to pass before we're able to make reasonable progress, is the implementation of this bill. I'm curious, I'm not going to get into specifics because I think I'd rather do it justice by just submitting them to questions for the record. I want to know about states that have applied for and been provided the extreme risk protection orders. It was very clear that we wanted minimal standards for due process. We don't want to reward states, and incidentally, they're red states and blue states that I don't think have adequate due process protections for the person who may be denied their Second Amendment rights. So we want to go through the grant streams, the approvals that have occurred at that time, and whether or not it satisfies the letter or the spirit and the congressional record that I'm very familiar with. It was last June that we got it done. I also want to compliment NICS with their implementation of the enhanced background checks. We need to make sure that they're following, again, the letter and the spirit of the law with respect to the length of time. And having a proceed presumption if we don't have meaningful information in the first 3 days, and then the final proceed order in the next 10 days. Trudy and the folks out at NICS have done a great job, and we found some really good outcomes from that we need to share better with the public. The last thing I want to leave you, I'm over time, I can't believe it, Mr. Chair. Last thing I want to leave you with is I would like to get a breakdown of the 17 cases under the straw purchases and trafficking language in the bill. And I'm particularly interested, I heard at least one alluded to gang organization that it was brought up on. We need to see that bill, I think, is going to age well. It's why I supported it, why I'd be willing to pursue other ones, as long as I can go back to the people that I worked with to vote for the bill and say that the spirit and the contours of that legislation has been implemented faithfully. Thank you.
I'll be happy to do that. I'll have our staff talk directly with yours to be sure we're answering exactly the questions you're asking.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.